Network, the whole point of my talk show is to show you that even with having a learning disability, I can still amount to something. And at the same time, I'm able to turn myself into an example for people out there dealing with any types of learning disabilities and disabilities to never give up and prove people wrong. Prove to them that labels do not dictate who you are and who you're going to be, so prove them.
Let's try it again. Hi, I'm Bryan Entzminger. You can find me at TopTierAudio.com, and I'm super excited to share that I was just interviewed on the Keith Andrews Network. You should totally check it out.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Keith Andrew, and you're watching episode 992. That is right, 992. We're here with a special guest who can turn your podcast, or any podcast, into money. And that's something that really caught my interest. So the first thing I want to say is thank you for being with us, and tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Bryan Entzminger. I'm the founder and the main engineer at TopTierAudio.com, where we do help podcasters to turn their money into revenue. I would say that we can't necessarily turn every podcast into revenue because there are some that don't want that, or maybe there's not really a monetization plan. But yeah, we're here to help them do that, and to come out of the other side sounding like $1 million as best we can.
No, absolutely. I would love to work with you if you're interested.
Okay, yeah, we can certainly talk about that.
So the first question I want to ask you is, you mentioned you're a podcast engineer. Who inspired you to become one?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of an interesting story because I had never really wanted to get involved in a service-based business because I know there's that whole trading time for money thing. But back in 2014, I launched a podcast because I thought, hey, I could probably do this. And I don't know, maybe a year or so into it, I was like, I kind of really enjoy this. And so then I started pursuing some additional education in the area of podcast production. I had some background in music and audio production. I'm a music major from college, so I had some background in that kind of thing. And I started educating myself and investing in the tools and just started producing podcasts for other people, first for free and then for not so free, and continued investing in the tool set and trying to get better and better at what I'm doing. And now I'm trying to grow more into also helping people with, the show design and some of those other more on the producer side of things, and kind of transitioning. And I'm in the middle of all of that. So I'm still in the weeds of editing. I have a couple editors that work with me, and then I'm also helping people manage their shows and, think about content strategy and how to market their shows. I'm certainly not a marketing expert, but I can help people with it. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask you some hard-hitting questions, and I want you to take off the kid gloves, and I want you to throw it back at me. I want you to ask me some hard-hitting questions. So it's fair. I ask you, you ask me. I have no cards on my sleeve. So the one thing I want to ask you for your honest opinion. Usually I save this to the very end. But I want to ask you, when I first approached you to be a guest on my talk show, let's start with the first question. When you got that email, was there any red flags? Was there anything like it could be a scam? What made you say yes?
Sure. So, I mean, I don't know that there were any scam red flags, but when you reached out to me, the first question that went through my mind was, why me? Right? Because I look at that and I go, what do I have to offer his audience? What do I have to offer him? Because I'm generally open to meeting new people. I'm kind of an introvert, so I've got a certain balance that I can reach, but I enjoy meeting people and getting to know people, and I enjoy being on podcasts, but I want to make sure that I'm doing something that's worthwhile for me, for the host, and for the audience. And so that was kind of the first thing that went, I don't know. But then I thought, you know what? I want to be on more shows. I want to meet more people. Let's do it. What's the worst that could happen? It's terrible. He decides not to use it. We never talk again, and he hates me. Okay, well, I can deal with that, right? And so that's really, I just like, yeah, let's give it a shot. Why not?
Well, it's kind of like being in a home. But the other thing I sort of was really interested is, I've been doing this for almost 10 years, and I would love to invite you to be part of my 10-year anniversary. Hopefully it won't be on Zoom because I'm getting tired of doing that. But people are like, 10-year anniversary, we should do something special. So June 10th, I'm planning on having a place in Warwick, New York, or maybe somewhere in the New York area. of everyone who I ever interviewed in show. We're going to take pictures, and it's going to be like a Q&A, and it's like, okay, we finally got to meet this guy. He isn't just a computer-generated face or anything. But a lot of people said to me, I should write a book. I'm like, okay, let's do something special. Take the pictures for the book. We can get testimonies for the book. Make it a very special event. So knock on wood, everyone's vaccinated and all that, and the corona stuff's hitting the fan. Corona shit stuff's hitting the fan. But I don't know. Plan B is to do it online, but plan A is to definitely do it in person. But the question that really caught me at your resume was, I help turn podcasts, well, let me rephrase it. I help turn podcasters into revenue. And I'm like, well, this is something I want to do. And by the way, I say podcaster, so it's easy for me to pronounce it.
Okay.
But do you think it's, from what you've seen on me, do you think I have what it takes to take it to the next level and make revenue? How do you make revenue off a podcast?
Sure. So I guess the first thing I would say to answer your question directly, I don't know that I know enough about you to make that decision or that call yet. So I don't want to say yes or no because I don't know enough. And like I mentioned before, not every show is necessarily designed for revenue. I would point to some research that was done last year, and I forget who published it, but they were talking about content creators in general, and they broke down the different sources that content creators generate revenue from. And from what I've seen in podcasting, it's really similar. And a very small number of people generate a good income from their content or from their show. There are some, and they generate it probably through advertising or some things like that. Most of the people that are making money in podcasting or in content creation are making money because of what they create, right? So I think of one of my clients has a coaching business. Well, her podcast supports her coaching business. She doesn't make money from her podcast. She makes money because of her podcast. Sometimes I make money in spite of my podcast, but that's a different thing, right? And so it's all about going, okay, what do I have that I want to sell? Because in the end, monetization is selling a thing. You're trading something you have for something that somebody wants, and then they give you money for it. And so for some rather large shows, and these are the ones that people always default to, like Mark Maron or Joe Rogan or somebody like that, where, well, I guess Joe's model is a little bit different now, but they make money generally by selling ads. And so they create an audience of people that care enough about their content that they're likely willing to endure ads for the purpose of getting the content. I think there's a bit of a misnomer out there that people like ads. And I think that's true sometimes if the ads are done well. There are some really good host-read ads that are out there that you just go, man, the way they did that was amazing. But most people, I think, just kind of sit through and endure them because they love the host or they love the content. So then you think about what are the other things you could do. And so you mentioned one, writing a book. Okay. Not always the fast method to success, but certainly it's certainly there because that helps establish your expertise. Similar to the other content creation, a lot of writers don't make their money from the book. They make their money from events or from things like that. That's another thing you could look at. Can you do an event that's a paid event? Do you have a large enough audience that would support that? Are there other goods or services that you could offer that are related to what your audience needs? And that's why a lot of I'll call them gurus, I don't know what else to call them, will say you need to niche down, right? You need to know who your audience is. You need to give them a name and you need to know who that is, because then you could know what it is that they want that they're willing to buy. And a lot of that helps you build your audience, but it also helps you go, okay, this is something that I know that Keith wants. This is something that I can do and I enjoy doing, and it's high value for Keith. If I offer this to my audience of Keiths, then a percentage of them will buy it. And that's how people generate money, not necessarily from the podcast, although some people do. So I don't know. Does that help at all? Or if I just created more confusion?
No, I agree. And my friend Scotty, and he also, for our wrestling fans out there who watch, Raven, former ECW champion. He has his own podcast, and he always likes to joke to me about how I missed the boom of podcasting. So I want to use that as a subject. When did the boom of podcasting become so popular?
You know, I listen to some of the old timers. I'm not really an old timer. I've only been doing this, I guess, less than a decade. So I'm about in the same boat as you. I don't know that there was ever a boom. I think that there have been ups and downs. And depending on how you want to define what the boom is, then you miss something because you've already defined it based on something that already happened. I would say that in 2020, there was a huge influx of new shows, primarily driven by a large free hosting company and people that were at home with a lot of time on their hands and nothing to talk about, right? But there was also a boom back in, was it 2008, 2009, when there was a bit of an influx of money. And then again in 2021-ish. And now it seems like there's a pulling back. It's like any, I hate to say industry because I don't really like to think of it as an industry, although in some ways it is. There are ups and downs, right? I have a day job where I work for a large company, and there are ups and downs with the customer base for that company. It's part of life, right? There's a pullback right now globally in terms of spending, certainly in the US. So some businesses are contracting. We're seeing that in the podcasting space because a lot of the big money is driven by advertising. Well, people are being more choiceful with their ad dollars. Well, that's to be expected, right? The large company that I work for has pulled back some of their ad spend because they want to make sure that they keep the lights on, pay the people, and don't have to burn the furniture, right? All of that stuff happens, and it happens in every industry. So I would say that as long as you're focused on the long game, delivering listener or customer value, you're providing something they can't get anywhere else, you're engaging, all of that stuff, you've never really missed the boom. Now, as far as like, is there a wave to ride like a surfboard right now? I mean, the tide's maybe going out just a tiny bit. Okay, well, that's fine. If you're, are you on a surfboard or are you in a boat? Which one are you going to be? And then you just have to decide how you want to play the game.
There was an expression from my favorite show. I'm trying to think of it without busting it. You played the man, not the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the case. And I've always struggled with strategy games, right? Like poker or chess or anything like that, because I'm always trying to play the game. I'm focused on the mechanics of the game. So I always lose. But if I play something like I do something with my kids where you hold your hands out and you're supposed to slap the top of their hands to see how the faster reflexes. Well, in that game, there's no strategy. I'm just playing my kids and I win every time because I know my kids, right?
Are you a wrestling fan?
No, I did watch some back when I was in high school, which would have been the late 80s, but no, not really. Sorry.
Back in, I think, 99 or 2000, Vince McMahon came out and he says, a wise man once said, life sucks and then you die.
I've heard that before, yeah.
But I just wanted to make you laugh. But with that being said, it is, well, let me ask you this. Do you think being a podcaster is kind of falls under the entertainment, does what you do and I do? Because I know you are a co-host and I want to talk about your show. And so the first question is this entertainment, what we do?
Sure. So I would say that it should be. And the reason I say that is because there are some shows that are focused on education. However, in order to engage an audience, you have to entertain them. You have to get them to entertain the ideas that you're presenting. And so I think that am I an entertainer? I certainly hope so. Do I get up every morning and think, how can I dance on a bouncing ball or something silly like that? Like a circus performer. I'm not that kind of entertainer. But just like stand-up comics, there are different styles of comedy. Some people are storytellers, some people are one-liners. You just got to find your way of being an entertainer. And that can be maybe a bit dry for some people's taste, but if it's entertaining to your audience, if it grabs their attention and I'm not talking about amusement, it grabs their attention and causes them to think or to consider or to listen, then you're doing your job. I think that there are some people who are very popular content creators who we think of as entertainers that are actually just amusers. They're just the clown in the king's chamber, and they're not even making the king think. They're just making everybody laugh and forget about life. I think that's a little bit different. And so I would say yes, but somewhere on that spectrum between the two. Does that help?
No, absolutely. Now, the next question I want to ask you about how you make revenue. For what are some of your top 5 or top 10 people that you worked with who actually turn it into something that's like, I helped this person become someone?
Yeah, so I've got a few that are under NDA, so I can't really talk about those, unfortunately. And I would say that I've got one that I'm working with now, and it's been a bit of a slow go. And it's partly because he's got a bit of a fragmented business model. And so I'm helping him to grow his show. However, getting that revenue conversion has been a real challenge because he's got a business and he's got a nonprofit and he's written a book and he's got a podcast. And so what we're focused on with him is trying to bring those all together, not make them one thing, but bring them together so that his show can support that. So unfortunately, I don't have anything to really demonstrate expertise other than just this is what I'm working on right now.
Hey, let me throw a curveball at you.
Sure.
So the first one I'm going to ask you is hypothetically, and I do want to work with you, what it would be the top 3 things you would change about my show to say, you know what, he has something, but he should focus on this more?
So I would say that I don't know enough about your show yet to
Right.
give you a really good top 3. But what I could give you is something that I see commonly among a lot of podcasters that may or may not apply to you. So one would be not really knowing your audience and what they want. And if that applies to you, then that's one of the things I would say, okay, we need to get this nailed down, because once you know what they want, then you can start to take that thing further. The next one would be to get clear on how you want to monetize. Are you looking to try to generate money from your podcast or because of your podcast? And if it's from your podcast, then we've got to talk about audience size and what kind of entertainer you want to be. Because if you want to make money from your podcast, it's almost certainly going to be some kind of ad-based revenue or sponsorship or something like that. So we talked to you about, are you looking to do host-read ads? Do you want to do ad insertion, which is a lower rate? Are you wanting to see if you can get a banner sponsor who would say basically, hey, welcome to my show, sponsored by such and such, and then they're the sponsor, so like they're getting a mention in the credits, that kind of thing. If it's something about making money because of your podcast rather than through it, then we'd talk about, okay, well, what are those goods and services that you'd want to offer? So I think it would have to start with that conversation, right? And go, okay, what seems to be the best option for you, who you are, and what your audience is? And frankly, if you're not really clear on that audience, it's a really difficult discussion, which takes me back to the conversation I was having about this guy with the fragmented thing, going, okay, we can't really be everything to everyone. So let's try to find the overlap. And that's something we're still working through. Yeah.
So like the expression, sorry, I'm trying to catch my voice. Like the expression, if you try to please everyone, you're going to set yourself up for failure.
Yeah. And I would also say that if you're trying to, I don't know, how would I put this? If you're trying to wear somebody else's armor, you're probably going to lose the battle. So you've got to find the thing that fits you. You can't choose my model for monetization, which transparently isn't super great because I make a lot of connections, but nothing that I can tie back directly, right? But that's the thing, is you've got to find the thing that works for you, who you are, the way you're wired. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Now, the other question I want to ask is, for people who have learning disabilities, who want to follow in your footsteps, what are your words of wisdom?
I would say, I guess first off, I would think about which disability, right? So if somebody is visually impaired but wants to be a podcast editor, I'd say that's great. First off, for most people, they're going to think of it as an audio only medium anyway. So that's good. And I know of several editors who are like legally blind and use software that helps them go through the editing process. So I can point to some of those people. If if you've got impairment in terms of like deafness, that might be a tough call in terms of wanting to be involved. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I don't know exactly how I would encourage somebody. If there's somebody with like a learning disability, I would say it's not rocket science. Like we're not doing algebra here, especially if you're involved in the production side. There's that. If you're somebody that struggles with something like ADD, or you're very creative but you have trouble nailing yourself down to one idea, you might be great at marketing and helping people with that. If you're somebody who's really strong in operations, maybe you don't want to be a podcaster, but there's a whole community of podcast managers out there that help people run their shows. People like some of the clients I've talked about, where they're too busy. They have a they have a day job and it's their business, and this is a part of it, but they don't have the bandwidth to manage the content strategy and booking guests and stuff. And so you can come in and do that for them. I would say that there are opportunities almost everywhere, regardless of where you fit in any spectrum.
No, I agree. Now, for the people who want it, for networks to grow, like for an example, be on local radio stations to get exposure, is there a certain number that you have to hit on? So, for an example, I don't know, if I'm in the New York area, there's WPDH, there's the Wolf Radio. They're not really okay, they talk about country, but just any radio station that has talking, like CBS and Fox News. How do you show them that, hey, I'm a podcaster, but I can help you benefit from me and you can benefit from you? Is there like a certain way to go about that, or once you become famous, they're gonna look at you differently?
Yeah, I don't have any direct experience with that, and so I've got some anecdotal opinions that might be worth less than they're given than the time it takes me to spend them or share them with you. So I'll ask, do you want those, or do you want me to just
Yeah,
say, hey, I'm
absolutely. I like
so
to know how you feel and think.
yeah. So what I've seen and what I've heard is that in many cases, radio stations, large national radio companies, that kind of thing, are kind of a churn and burn business where they only want you for as long as they can benefit from it. They want their contracts to be unilateral rather than bilateral. They own everything, you own nothing. When they're done with you, they spit you out. And I can point to quite a number of podcast editors who I know who went through the transition from the late 90s to the nows, who have been part of that group that left or was given the opportunity to find new opportunities. And they would say, why would you ever want to contribute to that industry that's just, they're just going to screw you in the end? Now, are they bad people? Probably not. But in all honesty, they have a business to run, and radio is really struggling. I think that there's maybe some exposure opportunity in radio, but my question would be, why would you want to even risk losing any kind of control over your content or any ownership over your IP for a proposition that is likely going to go away in a few years? That's just my perspective.
No, you're right. And it's funny. I actually walked into the Guinness Book of World Records, and I'm like, for how long? Because I had this idea like, hey, I came close to 1,000 episodes. Maybe I can enter the Guinness Book of World Records. And
Mhm.
somehow it came up with the very first internet show was 1993. And I was like, oh, that was pretty interesting. But then when it was the other records, it isn't the fact you're trying to beat someone's record. It's kind of like you want to carry that legacy on,
Mhm.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I would say, especially as a podcaster, if there are people that are deriving value from what you're doing, I would encourage you to let that be your legacy rather than some third party participation prize. Like, I like awards, kind of. Maybe other people like things differently. So maybe take that into account, that I'm not really a gifts kind of guy. And just, but like when I think about what do I want my legacy to be, I'm less interested in whether or not people remember that it was my legacy and more interested in the change that it's making in the lives of people in this generation and the next, however many generations there can be that would generate or get some kind of value from what I'm doing.
I'm going to ask you one more question and I'll pass it over to you. Do you have to be a household name? Yeah, I know. So I'm looking at my reflex, and it looks like I'm looking sideways, but I'm actually staring at you while I'm talking. Do you have to be a household name to get people interested in doing what you're doing? I'll give you an example. There's Paul, whatever the hell his name is, Paul Logan. You know, yeah, he's a fighter, but he also has his own show. You look at Howard Stern. You look at Mandy Moore. You look at the guy from Hangover, with Zach, whatever the hell his name is, was the one with the beard. He's not funny, but he's okay. But the reason I mention those people, they are Hollywood A-listers. Now, is it because they're like, hey, they've been in movies with Adam Sandler. This person was in The Hangover. Someone was in Body Parts with Howard Stern. Apparently, Howard Stern made that movie. But you need to be on TV and say, "Oh, hey, I know that person. This person's doing this, and you're got to be aired on tonight." Do you have to be like a celebrity, or can you be a complete nobody and say, "Look at what I accomplished"? Because that's how I see myself, as I'm a complete nobody. Man, my hands are tied, but look at what I accomplished. Do you think? I know there's two different points in there, but
Yeah, I guess the question I would ask is when you say, do you need to be this for
yeah,
what purpose? Like, why does it matter? Is this about whether or not people remember you? Is this about whether or not you get opportunities in your lap? Is this about whether or not you have some kind of benefit for growth?
I guess kind of like a legacy to be the first to do anything, because I've been told when they talk about or think about people with disabilities, they never come up with podcasting or anything in the entertainment world. Of course, you do have people in the entertainment world with disabilities, and they sometimes come out and say it or they hide it.
Hmm.
But I'll give you a quick example as of my education. I read and learn at a fifth grade level. I'm on the spectrum being retarded. I never went to college, and I pretty much get by with what I'm doing. But you say you're more qualified than I am. So I created my talk show. You know, I pulled it out of my ass, and yes, it hurt. And I'm saying I'm going to create this nothing thing into an entertainment company where it can entertain people all over the world, you know, Canada, England,
Hmm.
talk about disabilities and have some entertainment aspects to it and see what it grows. This is me saying, if I did have a college degree, this is my kind of accomplishment of opening a door for myself. So I may not be like
Yeah.
an expert, but it's kind of like a solid foundation, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess it depends a little bit on the context, right? So, if you wanted to create another ABC or CBS or something like that, it's not about what you can do, period. Like that takes a large team. Those are thousands of employees, companies with people that are super specialized. So if you want to think about your network as a success, I would challenge you to think about your legacy and your network not in terms of look what I accomplished. Look how, the reality of your story is very real and I think that's appropriate and that is part of your legacy, but I would suppose that the legacy of your work is not the network, but the people's perspectives who were changed because they got value from somebody who's on the spectrum. And all of a sudden, they started considering people for employment opportunities that they might not have ever before given the time of day. Or the people that look at you and go, if he can do that, I can do this. And that's the kind of legacy that I'm interested in. And whether or not it has my name attached, I don't care. But if people look at me and they go, hey, if he can do that, I can do that. The same thing for you, and probably more so because you actually have the potential to affect a different change than I could ever affect because I can't come to this with my story and share, hey, look at what I can do in spite of this or because of this. That's not something I can do. That's something that you can do that will inspire hopefully hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people on both sides of that discussion to change the way they think about what either they can do or what somebody else can do.
Yeah, I agree. Now, for people who are watching on YouTube and social medias, make sure to like a comment, make sure to like the video, leave a comment, because we would like to interact with you. And as we're on the road, we are 7 episodes away from 1,000. Big things will come to the Keith Andrew Network, but wrapping up, it was for our guests. It's a big thank you for you to be a part of my story and my journey. And it was a real honor listening to your story and your feedback. So I just want to say thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you.
But with that being said, until we meet again, our family and team, catch you later. Thank you, and have a good night.